Hello, it is Meredith and welcome back to my channel. Today I am going to be doing a February, March, and April wrap up. The first book I read in February was You Deserve Each Other by Sarah Hogle. This book follows Naomi and Nicholas. They are engaged to be married, but both of them want out and they have planned this extravagant, expensive wedding, mainly due to his mom, and neither one wants to get stuck with the bill. And so they play pranks on each other and basically just try to make each other's life miserable to see which one will back down first. I gave this book a 3.5 star. I thought it was fine. I really liked certain aspects of it. I thought it was funny at times, but I just initially really disliked Naomi. I didn't fully understand this hatred she had towards Nicholas because we never really saw anything that he did that was incredibly horrible. It just seems like she was trying to create these problems and I didn't understand her just complete disgust with him. That being said, the ending definitely saved it for me. I do think it had a very sweet ending. It did make me laugh. It was a funny book, but overall it just wasn't anything memorable for me. The second book I read in February was Darling Venom by Parker S. Huntington. This book is so incredibly hyped on TikTok. I have heard nothing but good things about it, and so I was expecting to go in and just love this book so much. Unfortunately, I did not get that with this book. I don't know what is wrong with me with these hyped books that I just do not see the hype with, but this book follows Charlotte, and she walks on to the roof of their school one day and she finds Kellen, and they are both planning to end their lives. They get to talking and they both decide not to do it, but they decide to meet every February 14th, which was the date that they had been on the roof, and just kind of check in on each other, see how they're doing, but they cannot have any communication with each other any other time. Even though they go to the same school and live in the same town, they're just not going to talk. Already, I was just thinking it sounded like November 9 because that is literally the plot of November 9, that they meet on November 9 every year and they don't have any communication with each other between then. But this was much weirder because they still see each other every day. They're just not going to talk. They're going to pretend that they're not friends. I don't know. I didn't get it. However, this book does take a turn. I was not expecting it. I didn't really read the synopsis. I just kind of jumped into it based off of everybody's love of the book. And so I was not expecting this big twist to happen. So I do not want to say what it is. But yeah, I ended up giving it 2 stars. I didn't understand the hype. I am so sorry. I know I am in the minority with this. Like I mentioned, there were just so many weird similarities between November 9, even though the plot didn't follow November 9. I don't know if I'm making sense. There was already the aspect where they met every year on Valentine's Day without any communication in between. And also, there was kind of a secondary plot where Charlotte's sister despises her because she had started a fire in their childhood home that had created a tragedy in their family, but also left Charlotte's sister, whose name was Leah, I think, but it had left this big scar on her face, and she just felt super uncomfortable with it and didn't feel beautiful anymore. And like, that's November 9. I don't know if it was even intentional because, like I said, it wasn't the main plot of the book, but it was just weird to me that those were both included and those are such big parts of November 9. I also just didn't connect to the love interests in this book. I didn't really like either of them. I don't know what it was. I just didn't have that connection with either of them. And I mean, this book is so long. It is almost 500 pages. It was a very emotional book and it does tackle a lot of heavy topics like grief and mental health, but I just didn't love it. I didn't think it confused me a little on what it wanted to be because it was tackling these heavy topics, but then there would be this random scene that was just out of nowhere. Like, it was trying to be funny but spicy but have this strong message, and personally I just think the balance was a little off with it. Not trying to bash it or anything, I didn't get what I had wanted out of it. So starting off in March, the first book that I read was House of Earth and Blood by Sarah J Maas. This is the first book in the Crescent City series. I'm sure you all have heard of it, read it, loved it. This was actually my very first Sarah J Maas book ever. I know that's wild. I am so behind on the Sarah J Maas train, but I finally read my first Sarah J Maas book. I read this book for my friend Sahar's book club called the Fan Row Book Club. It is a book club centered all around fantasy romance. She has some great picks, and for the month of March, she was so kind and asked me to be one of the co-hosts on the live stream. I went into this book completely blind, and so I knew nothing about it going in, which I think really helped my experience because I knew nothing about it. And apparently on Goodreads, in the synopsis, there is something that would have been a spoiler to me at least. So I'm going to try to describe this book as vaguely as I can. So in this story, we follow Bryce Quinlan. She is a half human, half fae, and she teams up with fallen angel Hunt Athalar to solve this crime that was committed that was very personal to Bryce. The beginning was very slow and confusing for me. I was so nervous when I was like 200 pages in, and I just still was kind of confused on the world and everything happening. I know that a lot of people have that critique, so it wasn't just me, luckily. I just was really struggling through, I know some people say the first 100. For me, it was like the first 200 pages were just very confusing. The way she set up the world just felt very info dumpy, especially when I haven't read a book from her before. I just was kind of bored and confused would be the best way to describe like the first 25% of this book for me. However, once it picked up so heavily and I could not put this down. When I finished, I was thinking that it would be a solid 5-star read because I loved it so much, but because the first 25% was so confusing for me, I ended up dropping it to 4.5. It's a book I would love to go back and reread now, knowing what I know. I think now that I am more familiar with the world, that I could follow along more and probably appreciate the book even more than I did, because I think for me it was really fun and I was very attached to the characters and very curious about everything, and so I would be curious to read it again, kind of going back and reading it for a second time. I'm curious how I would get more out of it. So that is something I definitely want to do. The second book just came out recently and I did buy it, but I was told that I should read her other books first before continuing with this series. So that is what I'm planning to do. So I am going to take a quick break from the Crescent City series, and then probably that's when I'll reread this and then jump back in once I am finished with her other books. Next, I reread an all-time favorite, It Ends With Us by Colleen Hoover. I think about this book every single day, and I think that's why I wanted to reread it, because there's not a day that goes by where I don't think of some part of this book. It is just constantly on my mind. And so I reread it and I'm thinking about it even more now. It is just so perfectly written and so beautiful, and I just love this book. The characters, the writing, Colleen Hoover's reason for writing it. It's just so heartbreaking and beautiful and tragic, and I love it with every fiber of my being. In fact, even though I had already read this, I loved this book so much on the reread that I went into a 2-week slump. So if you thought that only reading 2 books in February was bad, after this I didn't read a single book for 2 weeks in March. Just dropped it. Just no more reading for me, just only thinking about this book. So yeah, I'm not sure what I accomplished with the reread besides just loving it even more and thinking about it even more than I already was, but I loved it and I already want to reread it again. Next, I read Love in Other Words by Christina Lauren. I absolutely loved this book. This was another 5-star read for me in the month of March. This is a childhood friends to lovers between Macy and Elliot. We meet them when they are, I think, 11 years old. They're very young. Macy and her dad move into the summer home that is right across from where Elliot lives. She sees him in a closet in one of the rooms reading, and they bond over their love of books, and every summer they bond through these books and words that they love, and it is just so wholesome and sweet. This story is told in alternating timelines, so we follow Macy and Elliot getting to know each other, growing up together, eventually seeing how those friendship feelings turn into more than friendship feelings. We follow Macy in the future, where you find out that her and Elliot no longer speak. They are basically strangers to each other. This is due to something that had happened in the past, so you are reading to just find out what that is that caused these two people that were once so close to just cut off all communication. Like I said, I really loved this book. I really fell for the characters. I was so invested in their story. I thought that they were so well written. The only complaint I do have about this book, and it wasn't enough to take off any points, like I said, I still gave it 5 stars, but my only complaint was that I didn't like the reason for them falling out. I thought that they both had things in their life that had happened. I don't want to give away any spoilers with it, but I just don't get why they cut off all communication with each other because of that. I think that it was a lot of miscommunication between them, and I don't know, I was just not biggest fan of it. I think that Elliot should have understood more of why Macy was so upset. I don't know, I don't want to give too much away and like hint at anything, but if you have read this book, let me know what you thought of the big reveal, because I just didn't love it. Especially if you did like it, like explain to me why you did, because maybe I'm just missing something. I don't know, but I did give it 5 stars. I really loved it. I did tab this one, and I'm so glad I did, so I can go back and, you know, look at those moments, because this was a very sweet book. I love childhood friends to lovers. It is my favorite trope. Next, I read The Worst Best Man by Mia Sosa. This follows Lena, who gets left at the altar at her wedding, and the groom's best man and brother is the one to break the news to her that her fiance does not want to go through with the wedding. He has left, and the best man slash brother had played a part in the whole thing falling apart. So needless to say, Lena despises Max, who is the best man and brother. Fast forward a couple of years later, Lena is a successful wedding planner, and long story short, she ends up having to work with Max. I picked this book up on a whim. I had heard quite a bit about it on BookTube and Book Talk, and it was available as an audio on Libby, and so I just, like I said, picked it up on a complete whim. I ended up giving it 3.5 stars. It wasn't the most memorable book for me, but it was very funny, and I did enjoy the characters in the story, and it was just a very quick, easy read. It was what I needed at the time. One aspect of the story that I did really like is that Lena is Brazilian, and so the author includes a lot of Brazilian culture in the book, and that was really fun to read about. There wasn't anything in the book that I strongly disliked or anything like that. It just was a very fine read for me. It was 3.5 stars, like I said, exactly what I needed, but it wasn't anything too memorable for me. Alright, now for April, this is when I finally felt back in my reading mood. The first 2 books I read in April were from Ali Hazelwood's new feminist novella series, and that was Under One Roof and Stuck With You. Since they are novellas, they are very fast, quick, easy reads, and I was pleasantly surprised with both of them. I ended up giving them both 4 stars. I enjoyed them for what they were. I had a really good time with them. In Under One Roof, we follow Mara, and she has just inherited this house from one of her professors. She was very close with her. She was a mentor to her, and she had passed away and left her house to her. And when Mara moves in, she sees that Helena's grandson is also at the house, and so it is just kind of a fight between the two to see who is willing to give up their half of the house. The tension between them is so great, and it sparks just some romance there, so it was so fun to read about. I really liked that one. And then in the second one, we follow Mara's friend Sadie. Sadie gets stuck in an elevator with her lover turned nemesis Eric, and we just follow them kind of sorting things out in the elevator. You're not really sure what happens the whole time, and then you're slowly finding it out through these flashbacks where they are talking about stuff. And so, like I said, they were both really fun. They were really quick, so I think it would be hard for me to give a book like that 5 stars, because since it was so short, I don't know if it would ever have a super lasting impact on me, since I did read it so quickly. But they were really fun. They were a solid 4-star read, so I really loved them. And I just got my hold for Below Zero, which is the 3rd and final book in this novella series, and so I'm very excited to finish it up, see how I like this one. These two both had forced proximity, so I'm curious if the third one will as well. Next, I finally finished This Time Next Year by Sophie Cousins, I think is how you say her name, Cousins. I started this book back in January, and I have just struggled my way through it. This book follows Minnie and Quinn. They were both born on January 1st. Quinn was born a minute before Minnie, so he was technically the first baby born in 1990, and because of that, Minnie blames all of her bad luck that happens on January 1st on this event. Then one New Year's Day, Quinn and Minnie meet, and we follow just different years where they have bumped into each other, run into each other. That's basically all that happens in this book. As you could probably tell, I was not a fan of this book, unfortunately. I think the cover is so cute. I love the colors. That is kind of where things that I like end. I really disliked every single character in this book. I thought that Minnie's friends and her mother were awful, and I don't really think they were meant to be awful. I just thought that they all were. I didn't care about anybody. I didn't care about the romance in the book. I use that term very loosely. There's hardly any romance. We are basically just following them day to day and hearing about Minnie complain about her bad luck on New Year's Day. The romance was just lacking in this for me. It was about the two characters running into each other and the mishaps that Minnie has, but it was just so boring. I was so bored. I mean, this book took me 4 months to read. I don't remember the last time a book took me 4 months to finish, and it's not that long. I was just so bored. I dreaded picking it up every time, and I really just wanted to make it through it because I bought it. That's all I have to say about it. I gave it 1 star because there was nothing I liked about it. After that, I continued on with my reading of the Addicted series and read Ricochet by Kristen Becker Ritchie. I won't say too much about this one, especially since I can't, because it picks up right where the first book left off, so that would be spoiler filled. But if you have read it and you would like to hear all of my spoilery thoughts, I do have a reading vlog for this book. I will link it down below. I ended up giving it 4 stars. I didn't love it as much as the first one. I thought it lagged just a little bit more, but it was still a great read, and I'm excited to continue on with the series. After that, I decided to reread another favorite of mine, which was Daisy Jones and the Six. I reread this in a little birthday vlog that I did, completely non-spoilery, so if you would like to check that out, I will also link that down below. When I reread this, I decided to listen to the audio and follow along physically so I could tab, and when I tell you I tabbed the heck out of this book. I love this book so much. Like, look at all of these. It's just so good. I think Taylor Jenkins Reid does a phenomenal job at creating characters that feel so real. Like, this band feels so real to me. I have always thought about what it would be like to hear the songs in this book. I have just always wondered what they sounded like to Taylor Jenkins Reid when she was writing these lyrics that are in the back. And in the audiobook, at the very end, there was an instrumental version of Honeycomb, which was so cool to hear. It was just so neat. teared up just a little bit because it just felt so surreal to finally hear one of the songs. So I'm so excited for the Amazon series to come out, because I cannot wait to see Daisy and Billy and everybody brought to life. It is just so good. I love this book. And finally, in the month of April, I read my second Sarah J Maas book, A Court of Thorns and Roses. I finally read ACOTAR, and spoiler, I loved it. Totally worth the hype with this one. I gave it 5 stars. It was just everything that I had expected it to be, which was so great because I've heard so much hype around it, and it definitely lived up to that hype for me. I was very nervous going into this one after having read House of Earth and Blood first, because like I said, with that one I was very confused with the world building, and I was kind of just thinking that's how Sarah J Maas might build her worlds, and maybe people follow along with it better than I do. However, I was able to follow along with this book perfectly. I'm pretty sure everyone and their mother has heard of this book and knows what it's about, but in case you haven't and you've been putting it off like me, this is a loose Beauty and the Beast retelling. Feyre is responsible for providing for her father and her sisters, and so she is out hunting one day and kills a fairy that's disguised as a wolf, and so she gets taken away to this fairyland and is forced to live with her captors. I was just obsessed while reading this book, and even though I know that there's other books in the series and that they are very long, I didn't want this book to end, so I did kind of take my time reading it and just enjoyed it while it lasted. I am currently reading A Court of Mist and Fury, which I know is a lot of people's favorite, so I'm excited to see what happens and where she decides to take the series. That concludes all of my recent reads. Thank you guys so much for sticking it out and listening to me ramble about books. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up. Let me know in the comments what your favorite read of the past 3 months has been. That being said, thank you again so much for watching. If you would like to see more bookish content from me, don't forget to hit that subscribe button, and I will see you in my next video. Bye!